Welcome to ChessWhiz Arcade, episode 6, season 1. We're playing the game Uprising, or creating it anyway. Today is June 11th, 2015. Today we're working more on the server side. At the end of last episode, we really got into a bind with the Dependency Injection, with Signalr combined with Autofac, combined with Entity Framework. It just wasn't working together. But fortunately, I took a little downtime to scout ahead. If you imagine like I'm your guide and we're going down the path. Well, we got stuck. So I said, go to sleep right here. I'll go see what's coming. So I went down the path and I was like, oh, we needed to go take the other path. So I came back and I was like, oh, we should go back over there. So now wake up. We're going to go together. So I did not jump ahead. I did not transport you while you were asleep ahead. However, I did scout ahead so that we don't spend a lot of time wondering where we should go next. So that's the analogy, which tells you that, what does that analogy tell you? Well, we're going to do some programming, and I'm excited to do that. Okay, so what are we doing right now? We're going to go to full screen view. Bam! Full screen of ChessWhiz. Let's open up Visual Studio. ChessWhiz.sln. So here's the overview of what was going wrong. And I'll talk nice and slow. By the way, if you're let me actually just go to big ChessWhiz again. If you're watching on YouTube and this is boring for you, there's a little gear down in the corner, and you can go settings, playback speed, and bump that up like 1.25 or even 1.5, and follow the programming. And when something gets interesting, you can bump it down again. I highly recommend that for watching any YouTube video that's a little bit too slow for you, just because it saves a lot of time, 25% of your time, or 50% depending on the playback speed. So with that said, let's get back to the programming. So here's what we learned from my scouting ahead. There's a problem with dependency injection. Now, dependency injection is a tool that allows you to create instances of objects it creates them for you. So instead of having to say my service equals new service, you just create in a constructor, and dependency injection will create them for you and push them into the constructor. So for example, here, this state service, it requires a DB context and an enemy service, and these dependency injection creates these instances and passes them in for you. So when you create a new state service, you don't have to pass these in because gets injected. And then we step back one level to the thing that uses the state service, which is my hub over here, over here. And then see how this works? I have an internal state service, and then I have a constructor. Now this looks a little weird. And the constructor takes in a state service. Now, once again, you don't have to create one of these. Dependency injection will create it for you. So it creates the whole tree. So now let me explain what was going wrong. In traditional web development, your dependency injection has an access to the database, and it will create one database context per web request. So I send a message to the web service, say, give me this web page. This is kind of complicated, so I hope you can follow this. The dependency injection says, oh, you need to access the database. So it creates something called the entity context, or the DB context, which is part of Entity Framework, which is the platform we're using to access the database. It's a Microsoft Azure database in this case. So it creates one context for that web request. It creates it right when the request comes in. Then it does its thing, its database thing, and then it returns. And it destroys the context. That's important because the context is not thread safe. So you can't have one context running on the server for everybody, because one request comes in and then another request comes in. That's on a different thread for the server, which means the code is kind of running at the same time for both of them, which is good. Then they don't have to wait for each other. The downside is they can't be using the same database context. If they are, then one of them will make a call and the other one will make a call on the same object, and the whole thing will go very badly. It'll crash or have some other serious problem. So each one needs to have its own database context. So that's what dependency injection does for you. It says, okay, here's a request, I make a new context for you. There's a different request, I make a new context for you. They live separately, they do their thing, and then they return and die, and everything works great. The problem is Signalr, which is another technology we're using to handle communication between the client and server, doesn't play nicely with this. The problem is Signalr always wants to be alive. It has something called a hub, and we worked with this last episode. The hub allows for pushing messages between client and server. So the client can say, hey, I moved here, now I moved here, now I moved here, and he doesn't have to get a response. And the server can push messages to a client that's not sending it anything. And it uses WebSockets to do this, or long polling if WebSockets aren't available technology on the client's browser. So this technology creates one hub, and it just lives always. So when you make a request, it's like, oh, I already have a hub here. Now let me handle your request. The problem is that hub needs a database context in order to access the database. Is this making sense to you? Probably not. Just sit tight and we'll get to the programming soon. But the problem is that context, it's the same context for the same hub. To use an analogy, bleh. And so two requests come in, they come into the same hub, and then you can't use the same context. It's a thread safe nightmare. So the context doesn't die at the right time. I don't know if I'm making sense at all, but anyway, it's a it's a nightmare. So the solution to that is actually to have a context factory, which always lives, and the hub always lives. So whenever a request comes in, you say, hey, factory, make me a new context, and it makes one. So if we go back to the code here, you're like, okay, you want to move the player? The first thing I'm going to do is my factory.context equals new context, right? So now I've got my context. It's not a partition resolver. That's my autocomplete for you. And then it needs to create the state service and pass in the, or actually the state service runs the factory to make a context. In the end, you've got a lot more complexity because the context has to be created on the fly when the call comes in, because the hub isn't being created when the request comes in. It's alive between requests. And that's good, so it can handle its state properly because clients are connecting to it and needs to keep track of who's connecting to it. The problem, of course, is that you've got these factories. So I'm instead going to not use dependency injection for this portion of the website. I'm still using it for the main portion of the website. Like, here's the home controller that serves up the main web page. Let's let's run the website. Go to localhost. So I am using dependency injection for, oh, the whole thing's not building because of my I don't care about that. Well, let's try it now. I think that was the problem. I am using dependency injection for this front page, for this page that loads up. There's a little service that accesses news out of the database and says, oh, there's some new news. We're going to have a national master on the show next week. Currently, there's no news, which is why there's nothing in this area. But that's where the news would show up. So I am using dependency injection to access the context there. But when the hub is accessing that, I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to say, get me a new context. I'm actually going to type new context, please, and then dispose it at the end of the call. So that's the new plan. To do that, I've created something called an area. Right here, this is areas. And an area is something in MVC, Microsoft.NET MVC, Microsoft ASP.NET MVC, to kind of put an area of the website in its own area. Get it? That's why it's called areas. So I just created this area. I right-clicked and I chose new area. You can't even see the menu, so it doesn't matter. And I've done nothing with it. I named it Uprising. So you can see it has no controllers, no models, and it just has empty views. There's no views in there. There's just a view web config, which does nothing. And there's the area registration that says you need to go to uprising/ to access it. So I'm going to move this hub into, I'm cutting it and putting it in the controllers up here. I'm moving it out, moving it into the area. And this area is not going to use dependency injection in the same way. So this should be in its own namespace. Let me see what happens if I create a new controller and I just call it the blah controller. See what namespace it goes into. Areas uprising controllers. So I'm going to use that namespace for my hub here, just so I get the right namespace. Because when you move a file, okay, goodbye block controller, you have to update the namespace properly. Okay, so I'm going to move all of my service things that I wrote last episode, all these nice classes that are things in the game. I'm going to move them all, cut, and put them all in models here, which is a models area of this area. And now we've got the namespace problem again, so I'm going to add a new class, can call it the blah model, and you can see the namespace is web areas uprising models. That's important because all of these things have a service namespace, so I need to update their namespace. Kind of annoying manual process. Fortunately, there's only 5 of these things, so it won't take me very long to replace 5 strings of text. Any questions in chat while I do this? Let's check the chat box. Why can't I click the gear right now? Great question. He's talking really fast in my version. Okay, so yep, no questions. Great. So if you have any questions about all this, let me know, because actually none of you viewers are actually using this technology right now, so that's all right with me that you're not. So it's actually kind of doesn't matter, but maybe someday in the future it will. So I've updated that. But anyway, you can watch a cool game be created. So now I've got the 5, 6 classes. I guess there's 6. What's this globals one? Oh, it's the globals. Great. So now I got the hub. I got that. What else do I need to pull out of service? Because everything arcade is coming out of service. So we're done with the models folder. We've got these 2 service files. Now one of them, enemy service, has the get next spawn location code, which we wrote last episode for getting the next spot for the enemy pawn. And the state service makes a new game. This is the game start thing. So we're going to steal that logic, of course, in Uprising Hub. So this is the start call. Start a game. So here's game state start. I cut that code out and put it here. It says I'm making a new game state, which is now for my models. Add a new player. Why is there something called numplayers? I'll pass that in. How many players are you going? How many players are playing? There we go. Enemy position equals get next spawn location. So now we need a call for get next spawn location. Unfortunately, we don't have an enemy service anymore. So I'm just going to throw that in the hub right now, and we'll deal with it later. I'll make it private so nobody can call it, and then it'll be exactly what that thing is, which is this thing. So cut that, pull it out, and put it here. So I'm just stealing the code, except it's going to be private. So for right now, this is just some helper code sitting in my hub. In the future, I'll probably move it out into some kind of other layer. So this is just now get next spawn location, and that works. And return. Instead of returning model, I just call start game model, and I'm done. Move player. So does this thing build? We no longer have an enemy service. It does nothing. We no longer have a state service. It does nothing. So you see how it has a database context? I can create new database contexts from my hub, and I'm not going to have any problem with that. So delete all these things. What's in this model is a video model. That's not even associated with this thing. So let's see if this builds. It is not iState service could not be found. Oh, so we don't need any of this dependency injection anymore. Now does it build? Globals does not exist in the current context. Globals should be static. So why doesn't it? I shouldn't have to have a using statement that's the same as my own namespace. So I guess I didn't update the namespace for globals. Yeah, here's the problem. ChessWhiz web areas, uprising models, that's where global should appear. Okay, so now I don't need that using statement, and now I should build. Got my namespace is just a little bit confused there. Now these statements aren't needed. Some more usings that are left over. And it builds. Okay, so what I would really like to see now is this breakpoint, this move player breakpoint hit when I play. That may or may not work. Let's go find out. I'm a bit slow. What kind of chess is this? I'll show you the game now. So arcade, this is the website that we're creating. And play now. So this is a game called Uprising. You've conquered the foreign land, and we're going to play now. Bring up the development tool. So I did hit the breakpoint. This is super, super good. That means that the binding's working inside the area. This hub is being bound properly so that I can just be like, let me show you the JavaScript for that. It's right here. So this JavaScript is running, and it's saying hub.server.movePlayer a message. And then over here, there's a string message, and it's look at that. It equals a message, so it all came in correctly. And I guess we should go to the hub manager. See this call add enemy? Let's do that. Let's call back and be like add enemy. Clients.all. For now, it's just all.add enemy. And I guess I should pass an enemy in, although really, oh, I'll just steal this line. So this is just a test to see if I can. Why does the server have a call for add enemy? It shouldn't. There's nothing, no such thing as that, because the server always creates the enemies, not the client. So add enemy and get next spawn location. Just need to pass in a position, so let's call get next spawn location. Now I have to pass in a state. Oh, this is way too much because I don't have a game state here. You know what? I should call start. Why am I starting with move player? I should start with start. Duh. That's going to call start, and it's going to call start game, which over here does something. X equals 1. That's my way of saying there's a line of code right there. So move player doesn't do anything right now. Let's see how this does. See what it does. I do need to improve the game for mobile devices. That's correct. Let's go over here and set that in my to-do list. So here's my task list right now on Trello. I'm building the game engine on the server side, and I also need to add touchscreen support. So let's add that for next episode, because that does need to be added. Let's go back to Uprising. Okay, so what are we doing wrong? It's not running. Run. There. With laser says I missed a question. What kind of chess is this? Okay, so now we're going to find out. This is chess where you move the knight by bouncing over positions, and you capture stuff like that. It's a really fun game. And it's working, but now we're moving the logic to the server side. So I don't see this client-side call being hit. I can see a breakpoint here on add enemy, and it's not being hit. Let's refresh the page and see that it's not hit. Let's go to server side and see if start is being hit. And it's not. How about server.start, a message? Oh, I guess I should pass a number, but could that really be the problem? Let's find out. I'm going to pass the number 1 to mean one player. Just save. I don't think I have to stop debugging. Yep. Okay, now it hits. So it wasn't binding if I didn't pass the correct properties. So blah, 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 blah. Now watch this clients.all.start game. Now this is going to call. Oh, my breakpoint's in the wrong place. That one. Let's see if it happens. Finish that so I can refresh this, so I can finish that, so I can BAM! And it hits the client. So now model, let's see what it got. It got enemies, it got an array of enemies, it got level 1, it got players, it got start milliseconds. That's really important because we need to keep track of the millisecond number that it started on. This is the number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970, the epoch. So that's a lot of milliseconds. Super good. So now everything works. So let's change the client to actually depend on this call instead of starting. You know what I mean? You do know what I mean. So we're going to go to client time management first of all, because clock. Actually, let's check this in. Let's check this code in. Added Signalr hub, a new Uprising NBC area, because it's in an area. Great. That's 24 items. Definitely important to check that in. That was a major change. We didn't check in at the end of last episode. That was a big mistake. Okay. The time management is in Clock Manager here. And you can see it has something called Start MS, which is the time at which the game is starting. Right now, when you call start, it says it's right now. It's starting right now. That's not okay. It actually needs to start at whenever the server says you start. So let's think about how this is going to work. It's almost like there's two clocks going, because this is managing the frame rate of the game when it goes 3, 2, 1. See the I'm refreshing, so now we're going to hit this breakpoint again, and blah blah. Oh, I stopped debugging. Let's start without debugging, just so we have the site running all the time. Take that breakpoint out. So it goes 3, 2, 1 on the screen. See that get ready? It's moving up. We need the timer, the clock manager, in order to keep track of how fast that should move up. So we do need Start MS. But I think we'll just update Start MS when start gets hit. Let's add a new function. Dot. Server says start. We'll just call it server start for now. And we'll pass it in the milliseconds. So that's not a very cool function yet. It just sets the starting milliseconds to that. Last MS, what does that even mean? That's the milliseconds of the last frame on the screen. Screen. Should I be calling world.loop? It's almost like this should happen. This is actually a really complex and important part of the code, is synchronizing the server and the client's clocks so that they're running at the proper time. And it's not simple. But once it's done, then it's done. So I have to do it right. It's almost like loop and paint should still be called. You only call start once. So at this point, we also say this. Tick is how many frames have gone by. Let's see what reset does. Find reset. Whew. See, this code now should be pushed down by the server. Question in chat, is this Java? No, this is C# and JavaScript. Much different than Java. JavaScript is not Java at all. They have 4 letters in common, that's about it. And C# is like Java in that it's a strongly typed language that runs on a server or a computer. But it's also much different. It's by Microsoft instead of by Sun Microsystems, I believe. Sun. To think about the architecture here. Start game comes in with the model. Really interested to stare at this model a little bit more. The model is an array of enemies, which has its position. Yeah. It has the level. It's kind of obvious. Why should you just say it's level 1? Obviously, you're going to start on level 1. Why does it have the level? Because it's a game state, and game states store everything about the game, including the level. It's got the player, it's got the start millisecond. And the players list. So there's going to be some logic right here in this hub manager. Because I'm going to create the player right now. For each var p in model dot players. This is going to create the player on the map for each player that comes in. What's the constructor? The type, the color, the X, and the Y of the player. So let's just pull that out of here. The type. The type, though, is going to be piece type dot knight. We know that because the player is always a knight. The color is piece color dot white. The position X is models players p dot pos X, I think, is just what it's called. Players pos X and pos Y, and there's also score, which starts out at 0, so that's no problem. Okay, so this is going to loop through all the players and add it. Add that player. I actually think it's weird, but it still work, I think. Now we need to add the enemies. ChessWhiz, you're missing a colon. According to Hold Your Horses Tight. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Watch, I'll prove it by running this game right now. Maybe I am. Model.players p. Model.players. Model. Model. Mod. model dot players. See the problem? It's a capital P. That's not a colon. It's a capital P. Okay, let's try it now. Now it works, and look, it added him right there. It added that player, so that works. Like, see how one of them appears right away, and the other one appears right after. So this communication is totally working. This is very mind-blowing. This is going to be a super powerful tool to be able to send a message to the server, and the server replies back, put a piece right there, and then it appears, which happens really fast, as you can see. Right after you refresh the page, it gets added. So now in the world reset, I totally need to change this. For example, world.reset does this pushing, and it stores the player start locations. I'm just going to let the server control that, because then I don't have to update things in two places. For example, there's something called player start, and it's in player one start, right? And it's in the globals file. Where do they start? Right here. So I don't need to store that on the client anymore, because if I do, then I've got it in two places, and then if I change it in one, then they're out of sync and everything breaks. So I'll just have the server say, hey, put a piece there, and then it happens. So the client's a lot dumber, which means it's a lot safer. So the player array also is getting zeroed out here. So I want to make sure I do that first before I add them. Add players to world. Simple comment. Next, I need to add enemies to board. Add an enemy to world. Add enemies. Just pluralizing, because I can't do parentheses on pluralizing enemies. Okay, so this is going to be really simple. Again, I just loop through all the stupid. I need to figure out how to actually loop through things. Enemies. Right, that's what the name of it is. Enemies, yeah. World.enemies. And that should be a small e, thanks. Let's go to the world and make sure. There's something called spawn right now. And it does this. Hey, look, server spawn. You pass in the enemy, and it adds the new enemy. Cool. You know why that's cool? Because I don't have to use this world thing. I can do this. That's kind of nice, right? It's just one line. And I'm going to do that, maybe. Let's leave the brackets there. Okay, so this is going to create an enemy at that location. And the location's random. Let's see if it works. Bam! Do you see that? First one is there, and then another one appears right after. It's working. So what we don't do now is create one on the client side. Where's reset? Right here. We do not spawn ever. In fact, we should remove the spawn function. This is JavaScript code that says, this JavaScript code that figures out where you're going to put an enemy. No longer need to figure that out because the server is going to figure it out for you. I'm a little reticent to delete this code because if I ever don't like this server architecture, then I will need it. I wish I had it, so. So let's just comment it out for now. Put any functions that we're not using down there, comment it out. It is in source control, but I'm a little scared of just deleting my code. So it'll sit around for a little while. And then I'll delete it later after I'm really confident. So now this is going to create the player and create the enemy. Server spawn isn't really needed though, because all I need to do is this line. It's just one line. I'll leave it for now. I'm super indecisive, as you can tell. Okay, what else do I need to do? I need to set the clock. To sync with server. This thing sends down a message that says inside model here. the start MS is that. And I'm actually really interested to see what my clock manager dot start MS is equal to. Is that. So you look at that. Look how similar that is. The server said you started at 143.04.528.95.972. And that's really, really close. Oops, I lost it. To what the server started at. But of course, they start at different times because the message had to arrive at the server. So the difference in time is 60 milliseconds. Wow, that didn't take long at all for that message to arrive. Only 60 milliseconds apart. So we actually need to update the client's idea of when the game started so that it is in synchrony. So we're going to just say clock manager dot start ms equals model dot start ms. Now that's probably not enough, as you can see. Where's my clock manager? Here, let's pin that. As you can see, I also have this other code setting the last ms, setting the tick. I think this is going to fall out of sync, so let me check. I don't need to call reset here. See what reset does anymore. Zeroes out the enemies. That's no longer necessary, because that needs to happen when I add the enemy. It sets level to 1. That doesn't need to happen anymore. Some really obvious comments now. World.level equals model.level. Because the model is going to be like, hey, the level is 1. Duh. Oh, I lost my breakpoint. Let's try again. It's 1. So that's going to set world.level appropriately. So captures until level up equals captures per level. I think that I also don't need to track captures per level up, and that's a really key thing because the server is going to tell you. So I'm actually dropping captures per level up completely from. Search the whole project for this. That's the server side. Server side. Here is the client side. I don't need that. Find results. Enemy captured. Don't need that. Because I'm actually, see how this code says, oh, you got something, level up. Well, now it's going to just send a message to the server, and the server will reply, okay, good job. You're leveling up. And there might be some synchrony between, the client might do some of this stuff predictively. So I don't know for now, but I guess I don't need to track that just yet. Uprising globals, captures per level, and these two are no longer necessary, so I've commented them out. Okay. What else was I doing? Adios, hold your horses. I know you're gone now, so it's not really much point in saying goodbye. So I've set the start millisecond, I set the players, I set the level, I set the enemies. Captures until level up is 3. Do I need to say that? I guess I will store that because I might have the client like keep track of that just so it can be really responsive. The client knows when that's happening. So I guess I'll just undo what I just did. This part here, captures until level up. But I'm not setting it here. Zero, I guess. I don't know, because the server is going to say it. And so that's actually going to happen in my hub manager. Why is there a $? Take it away. Captures per level up. Come back. Now I need to find what it's called. Bam. It's called that. It's 3. So, oh. So now that's set. So now I've set everything. Let's run it. See if it works. Nope, there's an error. Let's try it again. It says connection reset, so maybe that's just a So did you see that? Look at that. Nothing was there, and then it appeared a moment later. Now nothing happens when you capture something, because that needs to be working with the server. So you can see it's crashing because nothing, piece is undefined and spawn is not a function. And that's on line 41. So should we fix that now? No, that's not going to work. We need to fix moving next. Okay, so this game actually works. The server talks to the client. And they say to each other, hi. So now, move player. So now an important and critical, this is an important and critical part of the game. Right now, everything is in memory. When you say, I'm starting a game, the server says, bloop, here's a game, and it sends it back, and the client starts. Now, next, the client is going to say, I move my knight. And then the server is going to say, I don't know what's going on, right? It will have forgotten everything. So it needs to know what games are in progress and what the positions are in those games. So that when I say I'm moving my knight up and to the right, it knows which knight and what's going on. Otherwise, the server can just, the client can just cheat. The player could program something special that says, I moved my knight and I captured a bishop, I captured another bishop, give me some more points, right? And there's no way for the server to validate what's going on. It needs to keep in mind tracking what's happening in the game. So for that, we need the database, and that is why I moved everything into an area, as I talked about at the beginning of this episode, so that I could access the database with a context that's managed. Its lifetime scope is managed properly. Its scope is managed properly. It's not a lifetime scope. So let's do that. We need to create actually a database schema. So this is going to be a new and exciting thing for the ChessWhiz Arcade. It's accessing the database. We have a project here called chesswiz.data, and it has a context. Right now, it just has the news in it. There's not much there, but it's time to add some Uprising entities. It's time to add some Uprising entities, which means some classes to store them. I think I want to move this out. Should I move it into its own folder? Because why would it be here with packages.config? Why would it be there? I guess I won't move it. Okay, so this is a menu that you can't see. I'm adding a new class. It's going to be called, so this is going to be called the Uprising Game. And this is the parent entity that stores everything about a specific game. So this is a database table, and it's got columns and rows. And what I'm putting in here, the properties, are the columns. So for example, it has the start milliseconds. But I'm going to make that an int 64, which is a 64-bit integer. Okay, so that tells you when the game started. It needs to have a list of enemies. So let's add another class. So this is new and this is exciting and new. Obviously, it needs to be public. That's the dumbest thing, that it doesn't start out that way. What do we know about enemies from the models that are being sent to the client? I do not want positions as objects here. I think I'll just store position X and position Y. Because I can't store an object in a table that's complex like that, not very well anyway. An int position, just call it pos X, and pos Y. What else does an enemy have? It has its birth date in milliseconds. Now this is going to be in reference to the start of the game. So 0 means it was created at the start of the game. I think that's everything that an enemy needs to know. You should be able to calculate when it will promote to the next type simply based on its age. But it's really tricky if the age is changing. I think I might want to store the milliseconds until it promotes. and its type. I think I might want to store that, because without that, I have to calculate, like let's say it's a rook because it's changed a few times, and say, okay, so its age is, 800 milliseconds, or really 8,000 milliseconds. Okay, so that's its age. So now I want to calculate if it's a rook or not. I need to divide that out by the number of promotions. But what if it's speeding up? What if it's promoting faster and faster because the difficulty is going up? So you can't really apply retrograde analysis in this case to determine when it promoted in the past, because the difficulty could have changed in the past. I think my conclusion is that I have to store the current type and when it will promote to the next type. I think I need to do that. Maybe not the last one, just the next one. And the type. Whether it's a bishop or a rook, because I don't want to be calculating that on the fly. That's a bunch of calculation that's not really necessary when I could just be storing it in there. So now I need a piece type, and I think I'm not going to put that in the new class. Uprising piece type. I'm going to make that an enum. Notice I skipped the knight because I'll put it at the end. No, I won't. I'll just do real types. Okay, so that is going to be the type that it currently is. So that's actually not a long, it's a uprising piece type, which you need to use apparently your own. Whoa! I put these in the wrong spot. This doesn't need to store this stuff. It needs to be stored in the model. So there's a difference between a model enemy. This is a model, a database model. It knows its position and it also needs to know its type. However, the model that's sent to the browser does not need to send the type to the browser, because the browser is going to calculate the type on its side. So, because it's flying through time. So this enemy, this is the area's uprising models, which is the model that's sent over the pipe to the browser, doesn't need to store that. So that's why we have two different models. The database one stores a little bit more, and the other doesn't. I'm sure I'll be changing everything here. But now I have a list of enemies. And I need a list of players. And these things are database models, so they're very flat. They can't really inherit from each other as well, although you could do that. Let's add a player now. This is slow going as we create the database structure for the game. A player can have a position X and a position Y and a score. Of course it has a score. And that might be everything. Like, what else does a player have? I think I have a player model over here. Just has a score, but it inherits from piece, and a piece has a position. So yeah, so I'm not creating the piece type in the database. I'm just flattening everything out. I think that's the way I'll do it. Because I don't really need a piece table. That doesn't need to be that fancy. So now the context. This is what's actually putting new tables in the database. Needs a table for Uprising games. I think I'll make that singular or plural. I think I'll make it plural. And then I've got some uprising uprising piece. I'm actually going to prefix all this stuff with uprising, and the reason is, what if I make another game that has completely different kinds of pieces, right? So everything that's about uprising is going to be prefixed with the word uprising, which is the name of the game. So now we're ready to add this stuff to the database. Uprising piece, does that exist now? No, why not? Oh, because there's no such thing. There's an uprising player, and there is an uprising enemy. So now we can actually roll this out to the database. This is going to be super fun. This is going to connect to the local database on my computer. I'm opening up my package manager. And we're going to go add migration, add uprising game. I think that uprising game needs to have a few more things in it. Let's compare it to the server front-end model here. Game state. Stores the level, stores captures until level up. I think I want those in the database. Start milliseconds, players, enemies. That's everything. Yeah, build that. So this is how you modify databases. You type add migration and you give it a name. And I have to change this to the data project so it finds the context. Bam! Validation errors, uprising entity has no key to find. Oh yes, databases need keys in them, which is the unique identifier. Which I'll just call it ID. And it will automatically determine that. I could just call it ID like that. Maybe that would make more sense. Sure, why not? Let's do it that way. Just ID. Whoa, not repository. Whoa! There we go, ID. And every game has an ID also. So it's going to say, oh, a column called ID. I know what to do with that. And it's going to automatically make that an auto increment database ID, if you know what that is. So it's going to put 1 in for the first row, 2 for the second row, etc., and all that for me. So here is, this is Entity Framework code first, and it's going to create me some tables. It's going to make an uprising enemies table. It's going to have an ID with identity true, so that means it's auto-incrementing. Non-nullable positions, birth milliseconds of type long, blah, blah, blah. It's got the primary key of ID, a foreign key into games. Isn't that cool? It's going to create games with no foreign keys. That's a problem. I think it needs to have a foreign key from game into enemies. So to do that, this needs to be virtual. Let's try that again. Make me a new migration. Does that have a foreign key now? No. What am I doing wrong? Each player needs to have a link to its game. Does that change the migration? Foreign key in, foreign key in. I wonder why the enemy has one. Because it doesn't have that line either. I don't think I need that in the children. Because I'm not like I'm going to pull a random player and be like, oh, what game are you in again? I'm always going to start with the game. So it's really the game that has virtual lists of players and enemies. Why doesn't that work now? And the context has games, players, and enemies. I think this should work. Let's do a little Google search. EF code first, foreign key, and let's add the word virtual, because that's kind of what I'm wondering about. How to annotate a foreign key. How should I declare a foreign key? Oh, we got so much help here. Stack Overflow going to help me. There's clients, surveys. Nullable. I shouldn't have to add this. Okay, it's starting to come together in my head as I gaze at this code. See, I do need this foreign key. See this right here? Something like that on the children. That says, I'm a foreign key into Uprising Game. And it needs to have an Uprising Game ID. And I shouldn't actually need this data annotation, so let's try it without it. And then we'll do the same thing inside of enemies. Try that again. Here's what it made now. Game doesn't have any lists. Oh, it doesn't need to be that way. I'm thinking of it from a code perspective, which says, oh, I need a link, but the code already has the link. This is a database perspective, where it says the table has a foreign key, into the player has a foreign key into the game, and the enemy has a foreign key into the game. So if you know a little bit about databases, this might make sense. Otherwise, it really is a foreign language to you. So let me show you an even worse language. Update database -script. So this is going to create the SQL code that will create these lines in the database. So this is some SQL, and it's about to be run. -script means show me what it is, but don't run it. It's going to make a new table called Uprising Enemies. Then it's going to create a new table called Uprising Games, and a new table called Uprising Players. It's going to put an index on there. Then it's going to add foreign keys on players and enemies. These are foreign keys on Uprising Game ID. From Uprising Game, references Uprising Game _ID, so Uprising Game ID. So how's that looking in my code? It looks right. The SQL looks right to me. That looks good. Don't need that. Really don't. Okay, let's run that migration. Here we go. Update database without -script, and shazam! Running seed method. That means it happened. So now we can explore, go to the server explorer, which is behind my screen there. This is servers. This is my own computer. Refresh that. Data connections. Here's my default connection. Refresh that. Tables. Look at that. Uprising Enemies, Uprising Games, and Uprising Players. They are all in there. So these were just created. Games has an ID, a level, captures to level up, and a start MS. Then there's players, which have a reference in, and enemies, which have a reference in. So if there's no rows in the players box, then the game has no players in it. Oh well. And if there's no rows in the enemies box, the game has no enemies in it. Oh well. So now we can use this new database. I'm kind of excited to do this. This is really a database-focused episode, isn't it? Let's go to the hub. When you call start, it's going to create that game in the database. So let's get a new context. This is what I've been talking about. ChessWhiz context. Okay. And I'll just, this using block says dispose of it when it's done. So this just creates a new thing called database, and it's a type ChessWhiz context, which is from the chesswiz.data namespace. This context is the database. As you see, I have Uprising enemies, games, and players in there, along with the news, which was there from before, and I can also save changes. So I now have one context for this request, and I dispose of it at the end of the request. This end curly brace ends the using, which disposes of it properly. So when I was talking about the beginning, about the lifetime and the thread safeness, this is handled by this using statement. So now I create a new game state. This really makes me think I should create a new Uprising Game. Add a player. But see how this isn't going to work because I'm adding the model player instead of the Uprising Game player? See? Oh, switching over from the models. Enemy position equals get new spawn location. I'm using the database models for this now. And this actually works because the models are really similar. So maybe you didn't track this, but let me just say it again. All of this code which used the models that are used to communicate with the client in web/areas/models, all of these models here, that's now, I'm switching it around to use the database models, which are objects that are very similar, but they're designed to be written into the database. So they're really similar, but they're not quite the same. For example, they have posx and posy instead of position objects. That's like the only difference right now. So now I will call moving this around a little bit. I'm going to create the object outside of the using scope so that I can access it outside. db.uprisinggames.add game, db.save changes. So this is going to add this game into the database. So this is actually going to do everything that it was doing before, but save it in the database as well, which says, I know the state of this game right now. And then I'm going to reply with the same thing. So now I need to convert this thing, so I will use a library called Automapper to do that. NuGet packages. Automapper, are you there? There's a library that I'm going to use for this. It maps from objects to objects. And I'm installing it. Come on, Automapper. The remote server returned an internal error. Server unavailable. Let's try again. Let's try the same thing twice. Oh, and this time it works. Thank you, computer science, for being so reliable. Can you imagine if you were in construction and you're like, well, I built the house and it fell down. I guess I should build it exactly the same again. That's how computer science works. I guess I'll just try the same thing. And then it works the second time. Doesn't make any sense, but hey, we got our Automapper. So now that we have that, we should add a new AppStart class. Automapper config. Automapper config is going to have something that configures Automapper. I should have a file in here called global. Yeah, there we go. See all these configs, they all get started? Register maps also, obviously. Look, register, 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 register. Clearly, this Automapper config should be static and should have a public static class function that returns void that should register mappings. And then I can register mappings right here. Why aren't you finding yourself? Oh, I'm in an app start folder. Not anymore. Bam! That's going to happen at the start of the application. I need a little tutorial here. Automapper, register. Mappings, right? Create maps, that's what it's called. Or should you do it? They're doing something similar to me. Mapper.createMap. So look at that. That's what we're going to do. This is actually a really cool tool. You guys should consider using it. It says, what's a mapper? And I say, look in the Automapper namespace. So mapper.createMap will now map between database objects and what I would call view model, or models that are being sent over the pipe by Signalr. So the database object is Uprising Game, and the client side one is currently called Game State, but we're going to append all of these. We're going to append them with model, so we'll call it Game Model. So it's been renamed now to Game Model, and that's what it maps to. So this is going to create a mapping between Uprising Game from the data layer and Game Model from the web layer. Bam! So let's also map Uprising Player to, and this should be Player Model. And Uprising Enemy to, and this should be Enemy Model. Anything else to map? I don't think there's any other database layer stuff. There's a position, which isn't going to get mapped. And there's a piece, and there's globals. So this is where the thing gets cool. Automapper is going to handle the complexity of the fact that database has pos x and pos y, whereas position, I actually want to call this just x and y, because what's the point in rename? What's the point, in calling it position.posy? That's a little redundant. What's wrong with my backspace key? It's not going to let me rename unless I say, what am I doing? I don't know. I'm going to rename you. There we go. Okay. To position x and y. So games don't have anything interesting in them, but players say, for member pos x as, how do you do this? Let's look up for member on here. For member. How do you use for member? It's a really basic thing with Automapper, but I just need this help. So it's something like this. For member destination of destination.someDestination property, which is pos x. Options, option.map from source some source property, which is come on here. This should all be one line. This is a lambda, in case you don't know. Dot map from source dot. Now we got our IntelliSense, pos x. So that's weird that they're both pos x. I thought the players don't have position, huh? How silly. They don't have positions. They have pos x and pos y. Now they have positions. Bam. So now I can use Automapper in this cool way. Source.position dot x. So did you follow what I just did there? It was so cool. Now I have a bunch of errors. Which I'm fixing. So I say the destination has position x and it comes from source.pos x. So maybe I just created myself a big headache and then fixed it with AutoMapper, but I really feel like I'm just so cool because I've created a position object in the models, but in the database, I'm using pos x and pos y. Yeah, I'm pretty stupid, aren't I? Why did I create complexity for myself? It's so that I could return a position from getNext spawn location. It is kind of nice. It is kind of nice. I'm thinking about whether I want to keep it this way. It's kind of nice to have a position like that. Here's my AutoMapper. Same deal here. Enemies need to map like that. It's kind of nice to say, oh, look, I'm using AutoMapper. Isn't that cool? So now I can invoke AutoMapper here and say our model equals mapper.map. And I want to create a game model. And I want to create it from this game. See how cool this is? This mapper. There we go. It's going to take the game, which is an Uprising game, which is the database layer, and it's going to turn it into a game model, which is the web layer, the view layer that the browser sees, and it uses AutoMapper to do that. So it creates a new game model and it puts it in here. Now why do I have a warning? That's not a real warning. Build. All projects referencing service.cs proj was installed NuGet package BCL build. Hold on, guys. I have to install NuGet package BCL .build. I think everything is. Maybe I need that one. Is there any updates to BCL? No. Let's see if that fixed it. Package must install bcl.async. Oh, you're so rude. And Microsoft.net.hdp and web must do that. Okay. So I'm going to mess with my NuGet packages for a little bit. BCL. Web needs that one. Web has that one. Web has that one. Async. Web needs that one. Okay. Why didn't you just install those for me instead of giving me a warning that says I need it? I don't know. So the last one is I need to install bcl.build if I reference service. Oh, and console doesn't have it. Okay, console is just the little test thing that I was doing. So BCL one more time. Let's give that to console. And I'm sure now that I've done that, it's going to say, well, now that you have that, you really, yeah, now console needs all the other things. Stupid. Why didn't it tell me when I was in here doing this stuff? So it wants async, and it wants the portability pack. Already has that. It wants the HTTP client libraries. And does it have this one? Yeah, okay. So now that's all the warnings, right? Yep, X is assignment never used. Okay, so we're going to see the new game created in the database. Here we go. It's running. Don't need any of this help. Ready? Go. Loading. Loading. Don't know what that was. An error. I don't care about you. I don't want to mess with errors. So instead of trying to figure out what I did wrong, I'm not going to use position in the model layer because there's really no reason the client needs that. So I'm just going to go back to X and Y in the piece. And that fixes almost everything. The only compile error is here. Just have to undo that a bit. Yeah, so why give yourself more headache than you need to? There's no reason to condense pause X and pause Y down to position for the communication down to the browser. I'm not getting enough value out of that. Bam. Game.players is null. So I see exactly what went wrong there. I have got a list of players and a list of enemies, but there's a difference between a list with no players in it and an object which should be a list, but there isn't anything there. So I need a constructor. Which says that players, that equals a new list. And there might be some workaround so that you don't have to set these. But now, whenever I create an Uprising game, I'm going to get new empty lists for these things, so they're not null. So that'll help me quite a bit. Quite a bit. Bam, bam. Any questions? If you have any questions about what's going on right now, you can certainly ask in the YouTube comments below, or if you're watching live right now, then you can ask in the chat box. And I see that we have doubled our viewership in the live chat, so that's pretty cool. It's a new exception. This is to be expected that we'd have a lot of problems because right now we are using the database for the first time. So the new error is an error occurred while updating the entries, view detail. Inner exception, view detail. Okay, what's the detail? See inner exception for details. The inner exception says to see the inner exception for details. What's the inner exception? Invalid column name, Uprising Game ID. Where am I using that phrase? Nowhere, anywhere. Let's search in the entire solution. So I guess I don't need that int. So this has to do with the foreign key thing. Let's go to the other one now. I guess I can get away without it. I'm curious to know, I've taken that out, if there's going to be any migration. So let's try adding a migration called test migration. Whoa! It drops the foreign key, drops an index, renames a column from Uprising Game ID to Uprising Game _ ID, and does all that stuff. Okay, so I want to remove that migration because test migration is not a good name for a migration. Is there a remove migration called? Fix foreign keys. See if it renames. Unable to generate. Apply the pending explicit migrations before. I want a rollback. A migration EF rollback. Help me. Rollback last applied. Undo. Rollback. How do I undo? This is probably it right here. How do I undo the last add migration command? If you haven't used update database, I haven't. You can just delete it. Okay, great. I'll delete it. This one right here, test migration. Goodbye. Now let's add a migration called fix foreign keys. Great name. And now let's run it. Update database. So this is fixing my foreign keys in my database, and either the parameter is ambiguous or the claimed object is wrong. It didn't run. What a pain. What if I have run update database? What if I want to roll everything back? It's not like I need any of my data right now. Yeah, this is going to roll me back 2 steps. So I'm going to call update database, and the target migration is the last good migration, which is add news table, because that's up here. So you can see add news table was my good one before I started all this mess. So that's bam, bam, bam. So now if we look in this data layer, refresh this, boom, see those tables are gone because it rolled them back. Cool. Databases are fun. Now I can delete that and that And those were just the migrations to keep track of what's happened in the database. So now I can add migration Uprising Game. So now it's going to add it properly with the correct foreign keys. See Uprising Game underscore ID, so it fixed that. So I don't know what was wrong with my alter, but let's just run this one. Now everything should work. Let's play. And we're going to add some rows to our database as soon as we refresh this. Bam, this is going to add a player to the database. Bam, it's going to add an enemy to the database. Bam, it's going to add a new game to the database. Cannot read piece of undefined. And as far as saving a mapping engine. Mapping exception occurred. The type needs to have a constructor with 0 arguments or only optional arguments. So the problem is it did save changes, so I bet we're going to find some data, although it wasn't, AutoMapper wasn't able to run. And the reason is the enemy, the player, the piece. Which one is it? It's the enemy. There's a constructor on the enemy which takes a position. And I'm just going to take that out. Stop the program. Which will, of course, make this thing no longer compile. Huh? Why does this still compile? I thought I was using that constructor right here. Oh, I'm not using the constructor. Okay. Well, let's run it again now. Ooh. Whisper. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. I got a private message, so I'll send one back. Okay, so this should add a second row to the database because that first one saved. So, but this one maybe will work without exception, literally. And it cannot read piece of undefined world, line 41. Kind of worked for a little. Let's go look in the database. So I have a program here called LinkPad, and it allows me to look in my local database. See that? It's pretty nice. So let's look in this table. It's level 0, captures until level up 0, start millisecond 0. That's not right. Shouldn't be level 0, it should be level 1. But here's 2 players in the database. Look at that. Player 1. And the other player 1 in game 2. So that kind of worked. Cool. But it shouldn't be level 0. So what did we do wrong? Why is it level 0? Let's add more rows. It's because this constructor isn't as awesome as this model constructor. My constructor for the game model has all this cool stuff. Sets level to 1, etc. I don't even want that. There, right? Because in best it needs to be in the data model. But it's really weird to have logic like that in the data constructor. It's really weird. In fact, it shouldn't go in the constructor at all. I guess these are okay. But let's take this part out. And let's put it in the logic here. Let's go. Game.level equals 1. Game.captures until level up. Game.startMS equals blah, blah, blah. Yeah. That way, it gets initialized properly. Oh, hey, while we're at it, let's go find out why that thing was undefined in world. I've lost all my cool stuff. I've lost my hub in scripts. Hub manager. Here we are. Pin that. Oh, I do have it. I don't think this is how you create a player. Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, it is. Should work. Not sure why this doesn't work. Okay, I'm running that. I'm refreshing. See, it says connection refused. That's because I stopped the server. So it's like, I can't communicate. So it didn't add the players properly. Where is this coming from? It's in mouse move. Let's go look in that database. Did it work? Query 1. There's nothing in query 1. Query 2. Yeah, look, game number 3, level is 1, captures until level up 3. There's the amazing start milliseconds, and there's a list of enemies and players. If I click that, I can actually, well, that's kind of cool. Query in here and be like, there's one enemy. It's at 1,5, which I already captured it, I think. Oh no, this is good. 1 in and 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. So that actually matches the game. And some of this stuff's not set. So I'll have to be smarter about that. If I scroll over here, I can see the player also. It's at 0.7, which is the lower left corner of the screen. And it's in game 3. So it's kind of working. But it's also not. For some reason, this .players.piece is... I'm going to let it just put things in my database and not worry about it. Cannot read property piece of undefined. I think it's if you make a mouse move before the server gets back to you. No? Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. That's what it is. If you move the mouse before the server has said, here's where player 1 goes, then the board has no players on it. And as a result, it's like, I can't move the player because there's no player, and that's when I get the error. So I need to make sure that mouse move is only listened to if the game state is running, I think. And that will solve that problem pretty easily. Let's change that really quick, and then we'll take a break. So here's the mouse move function. I just need to say if self.state is equal to gamestate.running, then actually I will still get the x and y of the mouse and the destination. Why not? But it's only if the game state is running that I will move. So now I think that I will do away with that problem. I will obviate it. Ready? Bam, 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 no problem. And nothing ever appeared. There it is. So the server was slower. You know, it was like database working, right? So now I need to synchronize, like it only says get ready when it's ready, because you can see it's taking a while. So I need to take a break because of some certain activities that human beings do every now and then. So let's go to this tab and desktop. Oh, you can't see the screen. Good. Glad you can. Let's give us an 8-minute break here. Or so. Cool. All right, so that's the end of part 1. In part 2, we're going to clean up some of the loose ends, but definitely we got some, hey, I should be on the screen when I'm talking. We got some connection between server and client. Everything's kind of working, and now we're writing in the database, so that's a big breakthrough. But there's a lot of loose ends. You can't capture a piece because it just freezes up when that happens, so maybe that's the logic we'll do next. Yes, that's the logic we'll do next. So coming up next, capture a piece. Cool stuff. This has been ChessWhiz TV. Thanks for watching.